Have you ever felt that rush of adrenaline when you picture yourself behind the wheel of a supercar? The roar of the engine, the stares from people on the street, the pure excitement of controlling something so powerful. It all feels like a dream reserved for millionaires. But here's a secret, some of those dream machines cost a lot less than you might think. And I'm not talking about fake kit cars or salvage projects. I mean real supercars, V8s, V10s, twin-turbo beasts that broke performance records and turned heads across the globe. Today, we're exploring a world where high performance doesn't necessarily come with a sky-high price tag. There's a misconception that anything wearing a badge from Ferrari, Lamborghini, or Porsche must be out of reach for the average person. Yet over the years, certain models have slipped into a more approachable price range, whether due to quirky design choices, overshadowed reputations, or simply the passage of time. In some cases, these cars still match up surprisingly well against the best that modern showrooms have to offer. We'll take a look at 8 different machines that all earned the supercar label in one way or another. Each has its own twist. Some found new ways to deliver jaw-dropping performance, while others stirred controversy for their unorthodox looks or rumored reliability issues. We'll talk about backstories, interesting rumors, and how these cars evolved in the eyes of enthusiasts. And here's the most intriguing part. These aren't hypothetical pipe dreams. You could find examples of these cars with price tags that won't force you to remortgage your house. Sure, maintenance and ownership costs can get tricky, but hey, that's part of the fun of going after a real exotic. Fasten your seatbelt because we're diving deep. Some of these cars came out decades ago, yet still hold their own. Others introduced new technologies or even outran more expensive competition on the track. By the end, you might catch yourself wondering, could I actually be one of those lucky individuals who owns a supercar? Let's find out. But be warned, once the supercar bug bites, it's hard to shake it off. And with that, let's jump into our first example, a machine that forever changed the world's perception of a Japanese sports car. If there's one car that single-handedly flipped the script on what makes a supercar truly super, it's the original Acura NSX. Coming out of Japan in the early 1990s, this machine landed like a bombshell. Nobody expected a practical, relatively comfortable, and reliable supercar that could still hold its own against European exotics. But that's exactly what Honda, branded as Acura in North America, delivered. When the NSX debuted, it boasted input from the legendary F1 driver Ayrton Senna. That collaboration wasn't just marketing fluff. Senna reportedly helped fine-tune the chassis to a level of balance that stunned test drivers around the world. Equally shocking at the time was its 3.0-liter V6 engine mounted behind the seats, delivering a healthy output north of 270 horsepower, which later climbed to around 290 in subsequent versions. While 270 horsepower might seem modest by today's standards, the key was that the NSX weighed significantly less than most of its rivals. Couple that with laser-precise handling, and you had a recipe that could scare far more expensive Ferraris around a racetrack. One of the biggest controversies about the NSX at launch was the idea that a true supercar couldn't possibly come from Japan. Supercars, people argued, were the domain of the Italians, maybe the Germans, or the occasional British manufacturer. But a Japanese brand like Honda? There was no way it could compete. Yet the NSX proved the critics wrong, pushing the boundaries of reliability to new heights. While a Ferrari owner might have dreaded frequent and costly maintenance intervals, an NSX owner often boasted, "I drive mine to the grocery store without a second thought." That real-world usability might have also hurt the NSX's mystique in some eyes. It felt too accessible, but the faithful still call it a masterpiece of engineering. Rumors have swirled over the years that the earliest NSX models were even more bespoke than people realized. Some collectors claim minor production differences could make certain first-year models more valuable. Others note that unmodified low-mileage NSXs have recently soared in value, threatening to outpace some older Ferraris in auctions. There's also a rumor about special factory-tuned Type R versions in Japan that remain unicorns on the import market, leaving many American enthusiasts drooling for a chance to own one. Yet the bottom line is straightforward. An early NSX, especially with a few more miles on it, can still sometimes be found at prices that seem shockingly low for such a revolutionary car. Maintenance costs aren't trivial. It's not your run-of-the-mill Civic, but the robust engineering means major breakdowns are far less common than on other exotics of that era. That reliability, combined with timeless styling, is exactly why the NSX remains an undercover icon in the supercar realm. But this was hardly the only machine to turn high performance into something surprisingly attainable. Let's talk about a model from Germany that overcame some early backlash, only to end up on countless Best Buy lists for performance enthusiasts. When Porsche unveiled the 996 generation of the 911 in the late 90s, purists nearly lost their minds. The iconic air-cooled flat 6 had been swapped for a water-cooled design, and the once distinctive round headlights now had that fried egg shape. Die-hard Porsche fans felt betrayed. Yet, as time rolled on, the 996 started looking less like an outcast and more like a performance bargain. And the 96 Turbo? That's the star of the show. Ignoring the headlights for a moment because beauty's in the eye of the beholder, the 96 Turbo introduced some serious firepower. Its Mezger engine was derived from the same lineage that powered Porsche's Le Mans race cars, which gave it a nearly bulletproof reputation for reliability. This design avoided some of the dreaded IMS bearing failures that haunted lesser 996 models. Right out of the box, the 96 Turbo delivered around 415 horsepower, all channeled through an advanced all-wheel drive system. Translation, it's shockingly fast, even by modern standards. Testers recorded 0 to 60 times in the low 4-second range, putting it squarely in supercar territory. At first, resale values on the 996 Turbo fell faster than many anticipated, thanks to that polarizing front-end design and the general stigma around early water-cooled 911s. But eventually, word got out. If you wanted a reliable, mind-blowingly quick Porsche for a fraction of the cost of a new 911, the 96 Turbo was the ticket. Today, there's a bit of a scramble as enthusiasts realize they might have overlooked a hidden gem. Prices have rebounded somewhat, but you can still find deals that make you wonder, how can something this quick and historically significant cost so little compared to other exotics? That said, it's not without potential drawbacks. While the engine itself can handle monstrous power upgrades, some tuners push it beyond 600 or even 700 horsepower without flinching. You'll pay Porsche-level parts prices if anything does go wrong, and if you're chasing big horsepower, you'll likely invest heavily in upgraded turbos, intercoolers, fueling systems, and a more robust clutch or transmission components. Then there's the styling question. Some love the 96's looks, others are less forgiving. But if you can handle an occasional critical glance from a hardcore air-cooled only crowd, you'll be driving one of the best performance bargains in the automotive universe. There's an even bigger surprise waiting in the wings though, if your heart yearns for that Raging Bull badge. Let's turn our attention to Italy and examine how one Lamborghini model helped redefine what an entry-level supercar could be. Mention Lamborghini to almost anyone, and you'll conjure images of wedge-shaped, fire-breathing beasts that grace bedroom posters around the world. Historically, Lambos were known to be as unpredictable as they were exotic, flamboyant, unrefined, prone to mechanical tantrums. Then along came the Gallardo in the early 2000s, representing a pivotal step for the brand, a more approachable, somewhat tamed machine designed under Audi's watchful eye. At first glance, tame might sound like heresy for a Lamborghini, but don't be fooled. The Gallardo's naturally aspirated V10 pours out around 500 horsepower, slightly varied depending on the model year, and the exhaust note is anything but quiet. Under full throttle, this car can send shivers down your spine. Early production Gallardos offered both a 6-speed manual and the E-Gear single-clutch automated transmission. Purists typically rave about the manual, which has become increasingly rare and expensive. Meanwhile, E-Gear provided lightning-fast shifts if you knew how to manage it. Neglect certain E-Gear habits, and you could face pricey clutch replacements. Back in the day, the Gallardo was overshadowed by its bigger sibling, the Murcielago, as well as by Ferrari's lineup. But a funny thing happened on the used market. Gallardo prices began to drift lower, making them one of the most affordable Lamborghinis you could buy. Rumor has it that some meticulously maintained early models, especially coupes with a decent number of miles, dip into surprisingly reasonable ranges. Of course, reasonable in Lamborghini terms is still more than many other performance cars, but it's within striking distance compared to the $500,000 collector's items. There are controversies to note. Some owners have griped about the earlier car's thirst for oil or sporadic electrical gremlins, and let's not forget that parts are still priced under the Lamborghini brand, even if the car shares a fair bit of DNA with Audi. But in general, the Gallardo established that a Lamborghini could be used more often, with fewer breakdowns and more refined road manners than the old Diablo or Countach. Enthusiasts also debate the rumor that certain Gallardo editions, like the Superleggera, may skyrocket in value, turning these entry-level Lamborghinis into future collectibles. Speaking of performance so savage it shocks the establishment, let's move on to a Japanese icon with a name that still sends chills down automotive spines: Godzilla. When the Nissan GT-R R35 arrived in 2008, car enthusiasts had already known about the Skyline GT-R's fearsome reputation in Japan. But the R35 was a different beast altogether, shaking up the supercar hierarchy worldwide. Suddenly, Ferraris and Porsches had competition from a twin-turbo V6 that, according to rumors, was intentionally underrated. In reality, many believed it made far more horsepower than Nissan let on. Nicknamed Godzilla, the GT-R uses advanced all-wheel drive, a dual-clutch transmission, and launch control that catapulted off the line like it's been fired from a slingshot. Early tests pegged 0 to 60 times as low as 3.5 seconds, which was borderline absurd in 2008, and that was just the beginning. Thanks to a robust engine design, tuners immediately discovered that with a few bolt-ons and a tune, you could reach 600 horsepower. Push further with upgraded turbos, fueling, and internals, and you might find yourself beyond 1,000 horsepower, laying waste to European exotics on drag strips and roll races. Controversy surrounded the car when some early owners reported transmission failures under repeated hard launches. Nissan responded with software updates and varying disclaimers about what constituted abuse. While a few nightmares persisted, many owners claim it's overblown and that the GT-R is fairly dependable as long as you stick to recommended maintenance. Still, repairing that dual clutch box can be painful if it does fail. One rumor that caught fire was the claim that Nissan's official horsepower rating was kept artificially low for tax or racing regulations, though Nissan never confirmed this outright. Speculation also abounds that some early Japanese market examples were even stronger than the global versions. In any case, the GT-R redefined the notion that a car costing around 6 figures, or less on the used market, could compete with or beat the world's best from a standstill to triple-digit speeds. If you want raw, tunable performance that still has enough brand recognition to turn heads, the GT-R is an irresistible option. However, it's not the only surprising choice out there. Let's jump across the pond to Britain and highlight a car that once transformed the public's perception of a wedge-shaped exotic. Lotus has always been known for lightweight is the right way, but with the Esprit V8, they decided to combine that ethos with a twin turbocharged punch. The Esprit dates back to the 1970s in its earliest forms, but by the 1990s, it had evolved into a slick, low-slung machine featuring a 3.5-liter twin-turbo V8. The styling remained iconic, angular lines, and a cabin that felt part spaceship, part Bond car. No coincidence, as the Esprit famously featured in multiple James Bond films. Although the Esprit V8 generated around 350 horsepower from the factory, many believe it was an underrated figure, and some modifications could quickly push that number higher. Handling was often praised thanks to Lotus's legendary chassis tuning, yet for all its prowess, the Esprit developed a reputation for being finicky. Electrical glitches, cooling issues, and the infamous potential for engine gremlins circulated widely. Some owners said it was all overblown, chalking up the rumors to the typical British sports car stereotypes. Others insisted that unless you kept a backup fund for repairs, the Esprit could quickly become a money pit. Part of the mystique is that Lotus, as a smaller company, had financial struggles over the years, causing speculation about the availability of certain replacement parts. There were also limited edition Esprits with unique interior or performance upgrades, fueling rumors that some owners hoard them, waiting for prices to climb. Whatever the truth, the Esprit V8 remains one of those cars that can still be found at a lower price point than similarly performing Italians or Germans. If you're willing to roll the dice on potential upkeep, you'll get a piece of British motoring history that stands out in any car meet. Some people might want something less edgy and more refined, but still undeniably exotic. Let's stay in the UK for one more moment and shift to a brand known for elegance, but which also delivered quite a performance surprise. Aston Martin evokes images of sophistication and cinematic glamour, thanks in large part to a certain British secret agent, but it's not all about the DB series cars. The V8 Vantage, introduced around the mid-2000s, was intended as a baby Aston, going up against the likes of Porsche's 911. Despite being overshadowed by more expensive siblings like the DB9 or Vanquish, the V8 Vantage brought a sense of class that was hard to ignore. With a 4.3-liter, later 4.7-liter V8 under the hood, it served up a delightful exhaust note that could be best described as refined thunder. This Vantage wasn't just about looks. Its aluminum structure helped keep weight reasonable, and it handled with precision that often surprised journalists who expected a gentleman's cruiser. While it might not have matched the raw numbers of a track-focused Ferrari, it was undeniably quick. Plus, the interior dripped with the kind of craftsmanship Aston Martin fans love: hand-stitched leather, polished metals, and a subtle sense of occasion. Controversies included rumors of persistent electrical gremlins. Some owners reported random warning lights or infotainment glitches. Others argued that the early SportShift automated manual transmission was clumsy at low speeds, akin to the single-clutch systems in older Ferraris and Lamborghinis. Despite that, dedicated fans have formed online communities praising the car's reliability compared to older Astons, explaining that Ford's influence. Aston Martin was owned by Ford for a time, helped smooth out some manufacturing issues. Rumor has it that the V8 Vantage was almost chosen for a Bond film in lieu of the DB series, but the producers felt the DB9 and DBS had more name recognition. Had that happened, the V8 Vantage might have skyrocketed in popularity. As it stands, it's a relatively overlooked model, meaning secondhand values can be surprisingly attainable. For those who crave an exotic brand name without sacrificing everyday usability, it's a tempting option. Up next, let's pivot to a legendary Italian marque that has turned out countless iconic shapes over the decades. This next car signaled a big step into the modern era of one of the most coveted manufacturers on Earth. Ferrari is synonymous with supercars, and the 360 Modena is a prime example of why. Released in the late 1990s, it replaced the F355, more on that one soon, and brought in an aluminum chassis, lighter, stronger, and more resistant to the dreaded rust that plagued older cars. With a 3.6-liter V8 howling at up to 8,500 RPM, the 360 offered around 400 horsepower. By modern metrics, that might seem moderate, but the car's agility and engine notes stole the show. If you've ever heard a 360 at full tilt on a twisting road, you know the special kind of goosebumps it can deliver. Why does the 360 often show up on lists of affordable Ferraris? Partly because it was produced in larger numbers than earlier models, and partly because its successor, the F430, overshadowed it with more power and even better reliability. Critics sometimes took aim at the 360's single-clutch F1 transmission, calling it jerky at low speeds. But in capable hands, it's lightning quick when you're pushing the car hard, and it certainly adds to that race car feel. The 6-speed gated manual is the holy grail for many purists, though commanding a premium in today's market. One rumored point of contention is how well the 360 stands up as it ages. Some owners swear it's a big improvement over older Ferraris, with less frequent engine-out maintenance, though still not cheap to service by normal standards. Others caution that parts can add up quickly if you're unlucky. On the flip side, many 360s have racked up decent mileage on weekend drives, proving that it's more durable than skeptics once believed. Collectors sometimes debate whether the 360 has reached or passed its depreciation curve. Could it appreciate in value as enthusiasts recognize it as the pivotal point between old school and modern Ferrari technology? No one knows for sure, but one thing's certain: a well-sorted 360 Modena still has the presence, the sound, and the iconic flair to turn any casual drive into an event. And yet, for all the love the 360 receives, there's another Ferrari that continues to captivate fans and stir fierce debate: the F355. Let's see why some call it the best-sounding V8 Ferrari in history. Some Ferraris are known for heartbreak, others for heartbreakingly good looks. The F355 combines both. Launched in the mid-1990s, it improved drastically on the earlier 348 with better handling, improved aerodynamics, and a free-revving 3.5-liter V8. Perhaps its most acclaimed feature is the soundtrack. With 5 valves per cylinder, the F355 could belt out an F1-like shriek that still sends chills down the spine of anyone lucky enough to hear it echoing through a tunnel. Performance numbers were strong for its era, about 375 horsepower and a 0 to 60 dash in the mid 4-second range. But raw stats aren't what define the F355. Enthusiasts love it for the way it feels, the instantaneous throttle response, and the emotional connection it fosters. The bodywork is widely admired, blending classic Ferrari curves with modern aggression. Many collectors say it's one of the best proportioned Ferraris ever made. But here's the big controversy: maintenance. The F355 famously requires engine-out services at intervals to replace timing belts. Skip that, and you risk catastrophic failure. Every few years, owners face a multi-$1,000 service bill, which can scare off potential buyers. Meanwhile, rumors about fragile valve guides in early production cars or finicky electronics have circulated. Some owners claim the issues are exaggerated, stating that once you perform the correct updates, the car is perfectly fine. Still, there's no denying the F355 demands dedication and a repair fund. Despite these costs, the F355 can occasionally be found at prices that strike outsiders as astonishingly affordable for a mid-engine Ferrari. The catch, of course, is that you might fork over the difference in maintenance. Those who take the plunge argue that it's worth every penny. After all, how many cars let you experience such a raw, high-pitched, old-school Ferrari sensation without climbing into seven-figure territory? So if you're weighing whether the F355 or the 360 might be your best budget Ferrari, you face a classic dilemma: old-school authenticity versus the more modern approach. Both have their merits, but only you can decide which prancing horse gallops strongest in your dreams. We've just navigated a lineup of automobiles that might redefine your idea of what's possible on a not-so-stratospheric budget. From the understated brilliance of the first-generation NSX, shattering the notion that only Italians could build supercars, to Porsche's 996 Turbo rising from the ashes of styling criticism, these cars prove that exotic doesn't automatically mean unobtainable. And we haven't even stopped there. The Gallardo brought Lamborghini ownership within reach of more enthusiasts. The GTR R35 took on the world with advanced technology. Lotus kept a pure driver's spirit alive with the Esprit V8. Aston Martin showed that luxury and performance can coexist affordably in the V8 Vantage. And Ferrari offered two compelling mid-engine options in the 355 and the 3T, both brimming with the kind of drama only Maranello can deliver. Of course, these machines aren't cheap to own. Maintenance, parts, insurance, and specialized labor can add up quickly. In some cases, those expenses might be on par with their more expensive stablemates, especially if you plan on pushing these cars hard or modifying them to squeeze out extra performance. But that's where the real question arises. Is your dream to simply buy a supercar or to live the supercar experience? If it's the latter, the intangible rewards might just outweigh the bills. Now is an intriguing time to explore these older supercars. Car communities are buzzing with rumors that clean, well-maintained examples might surge in value as more people discover how special they are. Some owners snag them as forever cars, content to soak in the engine notes and the timeless style. Others see them as stepping stones to bigger automotive goals, and a handful of individuals simply want to fulfill that childhood fantasy, finally owning the kind of car they once only saw in magazines or on TV. Ultimately, this journey is about more than 0 to 60 times or even brand prestige. It's about the thrill of the chase, researching, test driving, and possibly taking a leap on something that stirs the soul. Maybe you'll find your perfect 996 Turbo in a color you love, or you'll stumble across a decently priced Gallardo that checks all your boxes. Or maybe the raw yowl of the F355 is what calls your name. Whichever path you choose, know that affordable supercar isn't the oxymoron it once seemed. And so the question remains, which of these underappreciated exotics would you bring home? Would you gamble on the older models with their storied reputations, or go for something more modern yet still within reach? Whichever you choose, don't be surprised if it transforms your entire perspective on driving, and quite possibly your weekends, friendships, and bank statements. After all, supercar ownership is as much about the journey as it is about the destination. And who knows, maybe your dream ride is closer than you think.